We've been running a MPI Sustainable Farming Fund project on the giant willow aphid, and this has been looking at the introduction of a biocontrol agent, which Stephanie Sopel at Scion will talk about tomorrow. We've also been looking at the impact of the giant willow aphid on willow tree health, and this is some of the work we've been doing at Plant and Food Research. We've been running field trials on farms to look at the effect of the aphid on willows used for soil conservation. Regional councils have been asking us, are the willows being affected by the aphid? Is it affecting survival and growth of the trees that they're using for stabilising pastoral hill country? So we set up some trials on hill country farms in Hawke's Bay and the Wairarapa, and some are dry areas, and as luck would have it, we had 2 wet summers, so we didn't get the water stress that we were hoping to. The results are really from quite good seasons in terms of growth. The picture here is a trial on a farm in the Wairarapa. It's 4-year-old willow trees, and it includes Matsudana, Tangoya and Mutri, and these are the 3 cultivars that are mostly used for soil conservation in New Zealand. At each of the 4 sites, we had unsprayed and sprayed trees. And the sprayed trees, we applied insecticide to control the aphids. This was a systemic spray so that we could get underneath the sleeves here where we couldn't apply spray, and higher up in the canopy so we could control the aphids throughout the tree. And you can see after 2 seasons there's quite a striking contrast between the 2 trees. You can see with the unsprayed trees you've got a lot of sooty mould growing on the stem, and that's due to the giant willow aphids. They're a stem-feeding aphid. They're very large and they form clusters on the stems and they produce a lot of honeydew, and when that lands on the stem you get the growth of sooty mould. You can see the sprayed tree is quite clean. At the sites, we looked at the seasonal distribution of aphids on the willow trees. In December, there's very few aphids on the trees. They really just arrive at the beginning of summer, just some winged aphids in very small clusters. But on the unsprayed tree, you can see as the season progresses, January, February, March, April, there's a very rapid increase in aphid numbers on the trees. And by April on this site, which was heavily infested, more than 80% of the trees had large clusters. And these are clusters which are longer than 10 centimetres in length, so they're quite heavily infested. Then in May, June, when the weather gets cold, the aphid numbers drop dramatically. Reproduction is very temperature controlled, and so they increase very quickly when it's warm in summer and then drop off in winter. We had good control of aphid numbers on the sprayed trees, and we sprayed once a month from January, and we can see in January we had quite high numbers of small clusters, but following the spraying, we had a reversal, very small number of clusters and a lot of winged aphids, and same for March and April. So the insecticide was working well. The aphids were arriving, they were reinfesting the trees very quickly. There were a lot of winged aphids, but they were unable to form clusters because of the systemic insecticide in the tree. The diameter growth was quite variable, and this was due to variable infestation on the trees, differences in cultivars. The 3-year-old trees here, heavily infestated, and the unsprayed trees on the left in green showed a little bit lower diameter growth compared with the sprayed trees. And we saw this here also for 4-year-old trees in Hawke's Bay, which had high levels of infestation. Quite variable here. Mutri tends to be planted lower down. It has better growth than Tangoya, which is more drought tolerant, so they put it further up the slope. We didn't see a difference there. And for the site, there was a low incidence of giant willow aphids, so different sites had different levels of infestation. Height growth, a little bit clearer. Again, a small reduction in growth with unsprayed trees compared with sprayed trees. We saw this here with the 4-year-old trees from Hawke's Bay, probably about 20% reduction in height growth due to the aphids. But again, we saw no difference here and this site where there was low levels of infestation. In conclusion, winged aphids appear early in summer. They increase very rapidly during the summer months and into autumn, peaking in April and then declining very quickly in May, June. In terms of honeydew contamination for your honey, February, March, April are really your problematic months. Large number of winged aphids present January, February, March, April, and we had very high levels of reinfestation. So it's quite a challenge to control these aphids on trees. Survival of the trees, it's not something I presented, but it was very high. We had good seasons. We had more than 90% survival of the trees in the trials. So there was no effect of the aphids on survival. And with heavy infestations, there appeared to be a small reduction in diameter and height growth, but certainly the impact on willow tree health was really quite small, certainly with these willows that are used for soil conservation. So they are showing good tolerance to the aphids. I think there might be... There's one more slide that Stephanie gave me just before. We've got a survey which we're doing, and I think you may have received an online notification looking at the impact of the aphid on beekeepers. So we'd really appreciate if those of you here could actually fill out that survey. When we look to apply to the EPA for approval to release a biocontrol agent, and we're hoping to be able to do that next year, we will need some sort of a business case to put to them to justify the release of this organism. So if we can get some feedback from you guys as to the impact it's having on you, the industry, in terms of the honeydew problems, cement honey, it would be very helpful to us. Thank you.